Well, hello, friends, and welcome to From Busy to Rich. Our podcast helps advisors grow their businesses beyond the products they sell and the assets they manage, increase profitability, and reclaim their time by providing strategies and insights that will not only change your life, but practice. Today with me, as always, Wes Young, your host, and we'll be continuing the conversation, really rounding it out on this idea and concept that we've been playing with around baking a cake or building a company. So, Wes, why don't you give a quick recap before we dive into what we're going to be focused on this final session?
Yeah, Justin, thanks. The thing I think about with this is it is truly like baking a cake, is that you have to have all the right ingredients at the right time in the right proportions for the kind of cake you want to bake. And that's not my original idea. That was Elon Musk in his quote. But for last many weeks, we've been talking about this in a series. So if you haven't been tuned in, go back and catch it up, because we've been hitting a lot of things. First week, we talked about the ingredient of vision, development, and execution. And then the next week, we talked about having a high value financial planning process. Then we talked about the Mind Vault method. And then last week, as you said, we really honed in on this beginning discussion of building peak performance teams. Today, we're going to continue that discussion specifically as it relates to cadence and calendar, both on a weekly level, but also on an annual level, and some of the things to think about as you're dancing with your team. So the greatest analogy I have for this is like, if you've ever heard an orchestra warm up before the conductor's up there, it sounds like noise, right? It's just horns playing, drums beating, and nobody's playing the same thing at the same time. And that's true of a lot of advisor practices. If you were to check in with their team and say, you feel like you're playing beautiful music, or is it more noise? And they're like, it's noise. And certainly everybody has drift. So all of us that are think we have a good cadence, we need to often realign that cadence and timing. Because what we want to do is be like when the conductor stands up there, everybody gets quiet. And then those great talented musicians begin to play beautiful music at the same time, the same song, the same rhythm, the same harmony, same tone. And that's exactly what happens with a peak performance team, is when they're hitting on all cylinders, it's capable of being a beautiful cadence rhythm. And we find the best way to do that is, once you've made the effort of finding great people, is making sure those people are playing the same song at the same time, the same rhythm. And so using a cadence or a calendar annually and then weekly is critically important to that. So we took a lot of things we're going to talk about today from a great book, one of the best I've ever read on meetings, and it's called Death by Meeting by Patrick Lencioni. And I think organizations that have not read this book, it should be a book you read once a year. And if you've read it and you're like, oh yeah, that was good, read it once a year. Come back in and reread that sucker. Here's what we do. Yeah, so we operate really off of two cycles. One is the annual cycle, and the annual cycle for clients that have already been clients of ours for a year, they've completed the onboarding process. We move to a mid-year and a year-end. And that mid-year meeting is pre-scheduled at the beginning of the year. We don't ask the client, we just send out meeting invites. And a crazy thing happened. Even the first time we did it is they said, okay. And most of them kept those meetings. You'll still have people move, and you give them confines if you're using Calendly to do it. As you guys know, we use Zoom to conduct almost all of our meetings. But you pre-schedule them, and you can get a lot of meetings. Some people call this like surge meetings, and I get that term and why they do it, because they're kind of packing a certain kind of meeting in at one specific time of the year. Rather than doing this thing all year long the same way, which kind of drags it out. And then you're sometimes having to have a lot of different kinds of meetings because people, maybe you're onboarding, maybe you're also having this mid-year, maybe this other client wants to review something. Well, tell your clients in advance, hey, every year we're going to have a mid-year and a year-end. And that mid-year, like I said, is a bigger meeting, and we'll go into the details of that. And then the year-end's another strategy session that's shorter. And it's almost exclusively like a tax discussion where, hey, what things have we implemented already on your tax intelligence plan? What's still that we talked about that you should implement that you haven't? And then we do a projection of, in light of where you were last year, where are you going to come in this year? And we use Holistic Plan to do that. And then what other levers might we want to pull before December 31st is over that's going to radically alter the outcome that we want for you, which is unnecessary money going away to the IRS back to your own retained earnings. So when we do these meetings, and then we've got a calendar every week that I'll go into in a second, but here's some of the thinking behind it. And these are direct quotes from Death by Meeting. So one is that don't hold a meeting just to share information. Don't hold a meeting just to share information. And the other term before we had that language that we've been using is, should this Zoom be a Loom? Should this Zoom be a Loom? And for those of you who are unfamiliar, Loom's just a simple way for you to record you on the screen and then any other things you want to bring up, whether it's a whiteboard or it's a PDF that's useful. And here's the first place we saw this really move the needle for our practice is Monday is our prep day, where we prep for the next 2 weeks of upcoming meetings. And keep in mind, during a mid-year, there might be 12 to 15 of those that are on the calendar. And our paraplanners will have prepared for that the week before. And then we used to have big, long meetings where we'd go through every client and talk about, hey, here's what the paraplanner would say, here's what I think you're going to do. Here's where the opportunities are. Here's the things I think you should show. And then we would give feedback. And it just was long and drug out. And in fact, advisors that weren't a part of those meetings were sitting in on that meeting. So here's what we did is we said, this should really be a Loom. So our paraplanners will record when they had their head around it the week before, and we have a checklist for all this stuff, all the things that need to happen in that meeting. They'll have an agenda. They'll have the balance sheet that shows last year versus this year, and then the details. They'll have the illustrations if we want to show those, maybe performance reports. They'll have their strategy session, and they just kind of walk through, hey, here's the flow of this conversation as I see it. Here's the ideas we need to talk about on their strategy summary. Here's the new things that are not a part of anything they're doing right now that are opportunities or dangers or threats that we need to get in there. Do you see this any different? And they do it high level. It's 5 minutes. So Monday morning, as a lead advisor, and Justin, you do the same thing, I come in and I watch a bunch of 5-minute Loom videos as I'm preparing for those meetings. So it's a super heavy week, and I've got 12 to 15 meetings, 5-minute Loom videos, and in those I get an understanding of what we're looking at. I may shoot back that paraplanner some notes to say, hey, let's add this to that meeting. Let's add this strategy, or hey, this one's not as relevant anymore. Or I'd like to see this document brought up in the meeting. And it's that quick. So no, we didn't gather all the team together for it. We didn't have to sit through other people going through theirs. And if I want to talk about it, because we do still have an all hands planning team meeting that day for an hour, I will say, hey, I'd like to talk about this one. Everybody watch the Loom. And then in that meeting, let's discuss if I'm missing something, or I want to talk through this specific language or strategy on it. So it's an amazing way to do that, because you don't hold meetings just to share information. Most of the time, the reason people love meetings, they're like, hey, let's have a meeting about this. Well, the reason they do that is because we want to hear what they have to say about it. We can read bullet points, and that's why I'm not a big fan of shooting me a bunch of emails or shooting me the agenda. No, walk me through the flow of the meeting. Side benefit of this is it helps the paraplanner become a better paraplanner and eventually maybe lead advisor, because they're having to think like the advisor thinks. When you have in a strictly administrative position that's just, hey, cobble together this information and follow the checklist without going, hey, here's what I think you're going to do with this information, it is a completely different level of person. If you have someone that says, here's what I think we're going to do with it, that person's so valuable to the band and the music that you're trying to play, because then it allows me to focus more on those like bigger, more creative energy type things instead of administrative things. Of going, what's he trying to say here? Let me hear him just say it, or her just say it, and then I can speak to it. So thoughts on that, Justin?
Yeah, I was just curious what you would say to, I know a lot of our listeners that are on here today or listening, depending on when you're listening to this, or maybe you're watching on YouTube. But the point is they don't have a team. They don't have multiple advisors and things like that. So I guess kind of, if you want to give a little insight into, there was clearly an evolution but the framework stayed the same. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like years before you started developing the framework of this ideal calendar, and what it looked like a little bit each day changed, but the flow of it was the same, correct? As far
Yeah.
as it was just you versus now with, a team of 12 of us.
Yeah. I mean, we always say it like this because when I came in, I was it, right? I was the team. I was a one-man band. And I still had to prepare for the meeting. And that Monday morning, if I had 12 of them staring me in the face, I still had to prepare again for that meeting, even if I prepared the week before. So if I would have had this capability, we always laugh because if you don't have a paraplanner, you are one, right? If you don't have an executive assistant, you are one. And so you're still going to do this work. What better way to make your energy efficient when you have your paraplanner time, when you're preparing for that meeting coming up? Just spend 5 minutes. Give your future self a gift of putting your mind in the vault when it was all well-rounded around this particular client situation. And then Monday morning, your future self's going to thank your past self for all the things that you did that week before to prepare. So
Uh,
go
I
ahead.
don't know why that made me think back to there's one time my wife was talking to me, saw a sink full of dishes. It was just a rough day. She's a little overwhelmed, essentially wishing she had a dishwasher, right? I remember those days. I just look at, honey, we're so rich. We have 2 dishwashers. It's you and me.
That's right.
Like, that's kind of your point, right? Like, you got a paraplanner. It just may be you.
Yeah, that's right.
But
That's
the
right.
flow still fits.
Right.
Still creating a sequence of when you're doing things so that prepare yourself for success for the rest of the week so that you're not trying to just carry it all in your mind.
Yeah, and listen, if you're going, man, I am that one, this is going to be a gift for you to be able to make yourself instantly have far more capacity. Um, the second part is you probably eventually want to have somebody that's in that role, and go listen to last week's podcast because we talk all about that, how to continue to use your energy for the highest value things and also the things that light you up the most. Um, so the second quote that I have from the book that I'd like to talk about is the most effective meetings are often the shortest. So on our weekly calendar, every single Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we have what we call a daily headline meeting. And this meeting's 15 minutes, so it's very short. Everybody on our team that plays these roles is involved in it. And the goal of that meeting is to make sure we're not blowing each other up all day long, going, hey, where's this at? I need this from you. What about this? Because there's almost nothing that can't wait in a well organized team till 9 o'clock or 8:45 or 8:30, whenever you choose to do it the following morning. So all day as I'm going through and I've got to, I want to know where this is at, or what about this? I just literally put mine in a notes block on my calendar next to that meeting, and I fill that stuff in. So that then when that hits, that little short meeting, we say, Justin, who do you have anything? And you'll go, Wes, I need to know this from you. And I give it to you. I need to know this from Cody. I need to know this from Stephanie, whoever it is on the team. And everybody takes their turn. The great part is that saves us so much time and energy. And it's it is the shortest meeting we have, but the value it gives back to the rest of our team is so critical. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, just the back and forth, right? Like, how much can I eliminate the inefficiency of having to go back and forth? Because it's kind of the same concept, just from an email standpoint. You were talking about that second ago, from scheduling, right? Like, if we're using Calendly, how much easier that is versus, all right, do mornings or evenings work better for you? Morning or afternoons, right? Like the beginning of the week,
How
the
about
end of
this time? No, that time doesn't work. Can you do this time? No. Can you do this time?
right? Like, it's funny because we know these things conceptually in one aspect of our business, but rarely do we sit back and say, how can we apply this great concept in other aspects of the business or in other
Yeah.
components?
Yeah, and coupled with that, like when we talk about our mid years and year end timeframes, again, ask yourself that question: does this need to be an hour? I mean, it's a great question to ask on any meeting, frankly. But does my our year ends are typically very short, like I said, so they could be 30 minutes. But sometimes in mid years, we have some clients that are so succinct in what they've got going on, and we're sending monthly strategy summaries to them, so they kind of know where the status of their projects are, and their situations then complicated enough to where 30 minutes is good, or 45. but it doesn't always have to default to an hour. And that's how we operate sometimes. So I love the idea of don't think a meeting has to be long for it to have value. Um, Funniest thing is like sometimes advisors, they will do more for client. They'll be like, hey, we can meet every month. And it's like, well, for some clients, that's like, well, why? Why do we need to meet every month? Because you think you need to meet with them so that they still feel value from you. Well, listen, there's a lot of ways you can add value. One is if you just want to continue to let them know you're thinking about them, send them a monthly strategy summary that says, hey, here's when your mid-year is. Here's where your year end is. Here are the things in progress. Here's the things upcoming and things on hold. And then in those other meetings, by the way, mid-year, we've got scheduled 45 minutes for that. And it makes it so much more efficient. So it's not about the length of the meeting. Value is nothing to do with time. What matters is what kind of outcomes you want to produce. And in our case, like we see advisors all the time, they're like, well, what do you do when do you do your quarterly performance report? I remember Carl Richards talked about this in his practice. He said we would do these quarterly performance reports. It took an enormous amount of time. And we would actually, in one case, do quarterly check-ins with clients. And he was with a client once and he said, hey, I just am kind of seeing how do you, ideal world, how often would we be meeting? And he said, ideal world, almost never, because I want to be in a position where I think you're taking care of things. Now, once a year, we kind of State of the Union address is pretty good. And if something comes up that you need me for, or it's an opportunity, I want you to check in with me. But otherwise, I don't need to see this every quarter. I can pull it up, or you if you want to, if you got an easy way to send that to me, great. But don't go through this elaborate thing. And they did away with them. And you know what? Nobody cared. No one cared about that. So we often do because we think more is better. But sometimes just shorter meetings are the most effective meetings.
Yeah, if there's a ball flying at my head, the word duck has a whole lot of impact for me, right?
Yeah.
Very short and concise, deal with the problem or whatever the consideration or opportunity is.
Yeah. And the other one that I think pairs well with this that's in the book is if a meeting isn't necessary, cancel it. So here's a great example. We had a client had emailed to one of our team members, and that team member sent me that email and said, hey, should I go ahead and schedule a meeting so you can talk to him about this? And default would be, yeah. But then I said, no, we don't even, before it even got on the calendar in this case, we don't need a meeting for this. Let me just record a quick Loom with the answer to his questions and some additional insight of how I would think differently and ask him to give me feedback. That saved everybody time. Nobody had to schedule it. Nobody had to, even though we do that efficiently. No, we didn't have to, send a whole prep thing. I could spend 8 minutes figuring it out, 5 minutes recording it, and save everybody time. So one of the things I love about Loom is it will tell you every month, it sends you a status report. And the status report says, here's how many meetings you saved, because it'll give you the number of people that viewed the video. It'll also give you the number of videos you recorded and the videos you watched. And it's amazing amount of time saving that it gives you. And it somewhat correlates pretty well with the numbers they give you as to actually how much time you save. So some people, there's a great, I get an updated version of this. We have this picture, a comic of like this kind of ancient army out there. They've got shields and spears, and then the general's marching out of the tent, and he's saying something. He's saying, I can't be bothered to see any pesky salesmen. I have a battle to fight. But then they flash to the other side of the cartoon, and the salesman is selling a machine gun. And so it would make the battle that general's about to fight irrelevant. Now, at one point, that was the best way to fight a battle, and the general may be right. But this wasn't just a different shaped spear. This was a machine gun. It changed the battle that was being fought. And I'd say this for many people listening, and ourselves included, regularly, we've been doing things a way, and maybe it was the best way at the time. Maybe it wasn't, but maybe it was the best way at the time. And all of a sudden, there's a new way to do it that radically alters how we're traveling our day, that just makes certain things we're doing irrelevant or non-existent as far as what we're trying to produce in an outcome. I would move on and say that the next phase or the next thing is this one's big for me. start meetings on time regardless of who is absent. So when we have our team meetings, if somebody's not there, we still start on time. And because what that does is like the old Dr. Phil quote, we teach people how to treat us. And if you don't start on time, people learn that. And so if everybody shows up on time, but two people, and you wait till those two people join in, or you text them or call them or whatever, hey, where are you? Can you show up? Well, eventually the other people learn, oh, we don't actually start on time here. So it's okay if I do that. And it fosters a bad snowball. Like that thing gets bigger and bigger. So we start on time. And again, if you have people that consistently aren't showing up, then there's a conversation required. Hey, this is not how we do things. And we need you to either come on 5 minutes early because you're waiting to the last minute, or get some alarms going or something. So you show up, and when the clock hits the time we're going to start, you're already there. So here's what I would do with this. And the last thing I'll talk about, and then I'm going to give you like our weekly cadence. A meeting without clear next steps is a talk fest. So that's all it is. So one of the things we always talk about having a quality meeting is that I want to be well prepared as much as I can be. I want to have honest and honoring conversation, and I want to clear next steps. So out of all our meetings, clear next steps. So if that's a client meeting, we need to summarize that with what are we doing next? And sometimes it's we're not going to meet anymore. If it's a prospective client meeting that you've just decided that, hey, this isn't going to go anywhere. Or it's they're like, well, I want to think about it, or let us get back to you in a week. Or I said, great. What we'll do, if it's good with you, if we haven't heard from you in a week, we'll reach out to you once. If you don't get back with us, we'll assume that you're just decided not to take this course, or not to engage with us in this way. But don't just leave it up there for an endless follow-up loop, because even some people, because they're, very empathetic, and they don't want to tell you, I'm not going to do this. And they don't want to tell themselves they're not going to do this. They'd rather be, I think I'm taking action, by saying I'm thinking about it. And so we take that off the table with clients. We say, hey, yeah, while you're thinking about it, when would be a good time to follow back up with you on it? And if it's like, oh, I'll get back with you. Say, yeah, fine. If you haven't got back, when should I reach out to you? And then maybe that's a week, maybe that's 2 weeks, whatever it is. Say, great. We will we'll reach out to you on this date if we haven't heard from you. And if you don't email us back, we'll assume you've made a decision that you're not moving forward. And if you want to change that, you certainly can reach out to us. But it forces them to actually make a line in the sand of, I've made a decision. I'm not doing something by thinking about it anymore. I've made a decision. So here's kind of our weekly cadence of meetings. So I'm going to go like some things that might be considered personal, because I think they're relevant to the professional, because all worlds touch. When you are, so I start at my day. Now, again, you don't have to follow my calendar, but these basic categories, if you're going to operate it optimally, I believe in some way, shape, or form should be relevant in your life or exist in your life. So every morning, first thing I do, I wake up and I go to the gym and I exercise, because I want to have the best energy for the day. And for me, waking up really early before the day starts is critically important to the energy I can produce and the time where I'm not worried about responding to people. So before the day starts, in my case, again, some of you are going to go, there is no way I'm ever doing that, Wes, at that time. It's fine. Move it around for you, but have a time where you get up and you do some kind of exercise. That can be walking around our neighborhood. I wake up about 4:30 and I go to Orange Theory's 5 o'clock class, because I found for me in this particular season of my life, now keep in mind, I've got, both my kids are out of the house. They're both going to college. So that looks different when I had, babies and toddlers or people that were in high school, although I was in no danger of the teenagers waking up at that time. But it helps me to go, okay, now I've accomplished something. I've got the workout out of the way. I pray, because for me, that's real helpful, because that's a part of my faith tradition, is to pray and get some time really meditating and just trying to think about nothing also. So there's a great work that Dr. Michael Gervais does, where he coaches high performance athletes. And he says a common denominator is they have the capacity to take time to be in a meditative state, where what you're doing is you're focusing on Let me focus on my breathing. Let me focus on my feet. Let me focus on my feet relaxing, my calves relaxing, my hamstrings relaxing, my back relaxing, my face relaxing. Let me focus on my breathing. And he always does this funny thing, Justin, and I love it. He's like, so I want you to take a deep breath and you breathe in. And he goes, now take an extra sip. And so you really get that extra one up at the top. He goes, now really let that go and experience what it's like to breathe that way. But what it does is it forces you to not think about all the other, like if you just sit there and try and be quiet without focusing on these things, you focus on stuff. And even with this, stuff's going to come into your mind. And he always says, thoughts are going to come. When they come, say hello, say goodbye, and really just put yourself in that because what it does, it allows you to focus attention on not thinking about other things. You're focusing on you and calming. And I'm going to tell you, for us, we've noticed a very positive effect in performance in other areas. And the data for high performance people backs that up. So it's something to think about. And you can go look at his podcast. He had one we released right around the holidays on stillness and mindfulness. And he takes you through that exercise. So we'll link to that one in the show notes, Justin, so people can go back and check it out. It's be on our website. Then I have time where, because of my role, I read and I listen to podcasts and I write. I write about content for this, ideas that are working for us, and really just have that creative time. And because I'm up so early, all that takes place, and then I get ready, and then we have our first team meeting with at 8:30, where it's a daily headline meeting. And then we move into whatever it is for that day. Now, days are different. I do those things every day. But Monday is our prep day. So that's where I'm preparing or our planning team is preparing for the next 2 weeks meetings. And so we're all watching our looms. We have a 1 hour with each other where we're talking about anything as a team that needs to be talked about, because everything else was already communicated. And then if there's additional things I need to think of that have come out of our meeting together, I've got time scheduled for that. And then I've got some open time where I can just put other things. And that could be not a client meeting, because I won't have client meetings on Monday. I can think about I can have meetings with with someone in my network of help. Maybe that's a CPA or an attorney, somebody like that. Maybe it's another advisor that we're collaborating on some ideas or a project together. And then at 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, I do cleanup, because in your day, here's what's going to have happen. You've got emails that have come in that have changed your schedule for the week. And all these, I have little 15-minute breaks where I'm checking email, by the way. You have new opportunities that have emerged that you want to think about when you want to respond to those. And so you kind of reorder your week there. Anything on the prep day or the things I've said so far, Justin, that you want to comment on?
No, the only thing I would say is tie back to, for many of our listeners, I'm sure, are familiar with the analogy or the example. Sometimes it's a video of a professor with a jar and different size rocks. Right? If you start with the sand and then you do the medium rocks and then you try and do the big rocks, it doesn't fit. But if you start with the big rocks, the things that are crucial, the critical stuff, and then you add in the medium-sized rocks and then the sand, it all fits in. And even though it's the same size jar, it all fits and all works. So I think when it's your week, your year, both personally and professionally, start with the big rocks. What are the things? Like, I don't know what I'm going to be prepping for in 5 months from now exactly, but I know I'm going to have to do some prep work. Right? So that's a big rock that I just have to have on the calendar to make sure that I've got room for it. So just holistically looking at that, what are the things that truly have to be there? And then the other stuff, you have time and opportunity to fill into it. But I promise you, if you don't put the big rocks in there, they're going to pop up. And when you try and fit them in, there's not going to be space.
Absolutely. No, that's great. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are generally dedicated we still have our daily headline meeting where everybody's checking in, but then I'm allocating time for client meetings. Now, if it's mid-years or year-ends, it's going to be filled with mid-years and year-ends. If it's outside of that, generally it's going to be things like we're onboarding new clients, right? We're having new client conversations. There's fewer meetings. It doesn't have to be all those things. But it's also about, like, I can take strategic care of new things that we're working on. So we always talk about the tension between normal and new. Like, you have a current way you go about making progress, and you can have a future different way about making progress. New ideas that have never been a part of your muscle memory, they sometimes take a little bit more energy. So great times to implement new ideas and put in place new softwares or learn new approaches or take classes. That's going to happen outside of our mid-year and year end. We have a lot more time on the calendar for new during those times. So we're still onboarding new clients because we're getting referred those all the time. But so you still block out the same client meeting time, but then you're not necessarily filling it up like you are in mid-years and year ends because those are kind of stacked on one another. And then Thursday, we still have the one difference here is Thursday, we still have our daily headline. And then our team goes a little longer here. So in the morning, we basically add another hour to an hour and a half. And what we do there is two things. One is we do what we call growth and development time. And that's where we're always like listening to a podcast or a TED Talk or reading a book together. And we, in that meeting, will talk about, okay, what were your observations here? How do you think they apply to your life? How do you think they apply to the business? Sometimes it's very business focused. Sometimes it's just how to live a better life. Because guess what that affects? How well you do in your business. And it's a way for you to interact with your team differently. And so we talk about that for about 15, 20 minutes. And then we get into our longer tactical staff meeting. And this is where we basically say, hey, look, let's talk about how we're doing. So we have KPIs, that we track. How's our profit sharing metrics going? How much have we earned relative to how much we need to hit our next, where everybody gets paid a profit sharing metric or a bonus, some of you might think of. Where are we at related to our strategic goals? How are our lead indicators? Like it could be number of client meetings we're having, number of applications, new applications submitted. For some of you, that may be one. All those things matter in like driving the outcome, the revenue outcome that we need. But we talk about that. We measure it. We also talk about, hey, what was your win this week? One of them that you could talk about, because our win organizationally is to inspire people to increase their profitability and quality of life. And depending on your department, you're doing things that are helping people in that mission. So we talk about, well, I met with this family this week and they just thanked us for like the progress they've made over this amount of time. Or we finally got so-and-so to implement this outstanding life insurance contract that they were wanting to put in the family bank that's been kind of hung up, but that's been done. So could be a number of things. Could you celebrate somebody on the team? Hey, you did a great Loom video on that estate flow that's a paraplanner and you want to celebrate, whatever it might be. There's a number of things like that come up. But what are your wins? Because here's what we get so focused on, especially if you're a striver. And if you're listening to this, you're probably a striver because you probably didn't tune in to go, oh, this will be fun. I'll just hang out. I got nothing else to do. You're doing it because you like results and you want to push things forward. Nothing wrong with that. So with us, though, the difficulty sometimes we get so focused on where we want to go, we aren't grateful for where we are on our way to where we're going. And as a result, we don't love the process necessarily. We're looking for when I get there, then I'll be happy. Well, you won't be, because then there'll be another over there. So taking time to celebrate wins is incredibly important organizationally, and that's where we do that. And then just any other all skate stuff. Where are you out anytime in the next couple of weeks that we need to know about that's going to impact the team? What are the big things you're working on right now? Can anybody help you with that outside of just what we're hearing, the quick tidbits and headline? And then we jump back into client meetings. And again, at the end of every day, I have like a cleanup where I'm just saying, what's my plan for the day now that I know this day is over and I have new information? Last but not least, as we land the plane here, is Fridays. So Fridays for me, they're mostly a flex day. Now, what I do, because of my role in the organization, is I'll also do one-on-one meetings with my direct reports. And then they have one-on-one meetings with theirs as well, where they think about like, hey, what are you seeing organizationally that's not, you feel like not going well for you? What's going well for you? What can I do to help you in that? Or if I just have a concept or an idea that I want to think with someone on, I can use that time for that. But that one-on-one engagement is really important to us organizationally. And then I will sometimes do a client meeting on Friday, but usually that's a lunch meeting that's more because they're also my very good friend that happens to be local. You guys know we have clients all across the country because we use Zoom to have almost all of our client meetings, including for those guys that are in town, right? Including for our clients that are in town. But some of them are also some of my best friends. So I'll say, hey, let's go meet for lunch. And usually business stuff comes up, so it's not like a formal deal, but you can also use it to develop relationships with people that you want to connect with in a different way. So I'll have a lunch, and then I have just various things that projects I haven't gotten to, cleanup I want to do for Friday afternoon. Or if I'm good, or at least I feel like I'm good enough, sometimes we take off, and that's good. So that's kind of our dance. Any thoughts to add to that, Justin, as we close?
No, just encouraging our listeners that this is flexible. Obviously, kind of play around with it, what fits you. There's a number of different resources out there, but creating some sort of rhythm will dramatically increase your efficiency and capabilities. And so this is one of those things that's a quick 10x return, and it is absolutely necessary for the right recipe when it comes to building a successful business.
Love it.
Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you guys next time.